So the things we're going to tackle this morning are fun and kind of a fun exercise to kind of think through. However, none of this is primary theology. What do I mean by that? Yeah, it means we can all disagree, as in I can present, my goal today is not to take hard stances on anything. I'm going to present the options. You guys are going to probably sense what my opinion is, because I have a really hard time guising that. Some people are better than that than I am. But what I'm going to try to do this morning is just kind of present to you the different options and the way people think. And then I'll probably end up giving you my opinion because I can't generally help myself. And the topics that we're talking about today are the issues of the young and the new earth. We're going to talk about dinosaurs today. And then we're going to talk about Calvinism and Arminianism. Okay? And so those are the three things we're going to cover. My guess is that it won't take us the whole class, but sometimes I get long-winded, so we'll see. Okay? Any questions on any of that before we get started? You guys good? Good. All right. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is this issue of young and old earth. Now, what we're going to do is I'm going to present to you what the mindset is between each one. And then I'm going to ask you guys, so be thinking about it as I'm talking. I'm going to be asking you guys what problems you might see with it. Okay? Does that make sense? We're going to talk about what it is and then talk about what issues might come from it. Okay, so there's a discussion about the age of the earth and how it works with our current understanding of science. Again, science can help us understand God's creation and how He created everything. The current conversation breaks down into two main categories. Now, the first thing I wanted to bring up before we even get started, and I put it in there so that I would remember, just like I am right now, is that is science, is it an enemy of God?
No.
Okay, explain.
Scripture says creation reveals God. So when we dive deeper into science, I think it actually reveals God's nature and design.
Yeah, right? And I think there's a danger in thinking that science is the enemy of Christianity. Now, science done improperly, okay, or if theories in science are taken as truth, right, then that's where problems start to arise. However, science in and of itself, what is science as we've defined it before? What is a scientific method? Do you guys remember? What is it? What's that?
The hypothesis, and then you set out to give evidence to it, and you do it all over again.
Right. So it's something that you have a hypothesis, you provide evidence, right? You get a conclusion, and then you're able to duplicate it, and it's the exact same. Okay? So again, scientific method is actually something that backs up what we believe, right? The things that have been able to be proven by scientific method have actually been beneficial. Yeah, Lisa, go ahead.
I think that we have to recognize that science doesn't prove anything. It displays evidence. So science, if it's testable, observable, and repeatable,
Yep.
then we can use this evidence to arrive at something.
Right on the money.
Science doesn't prove anything. And then people will say science proves, and
Sure.
then you go, ooh, there's an agenda there.
Sure. Yeah, good point. Great point. Okay, so we're going to start with the young and the new. Okay, so again, I'm trying to give you guys verbiage so that way when it gets brought up, you're like, wait a minute, we talked about young earth, and they're saying new earth. So I'm just giving you kind of the verbiage of what people bring up. And again, these are generally conversations that happen between believers, right? So most of this class has been about conversations that you're going to have with non-believers, and these things might come up. But when you're having discussions about whether or not you agree if it's a young or a new or a old earth, that's generally probably going to be between believers. So hopefully this means that it leads to beneficial, edifying conversation. Okay? All right, so the first one is that the universe in young earth is somewhere between 6,000 and 20,000 years old. And what's funny is, even in young earth circles, they can't really agree on where that even lands. Okay, they just agree that it's somewhere under 20. That's where they try to get it. So where do you guys think they get that number from? Where do they get the 6,000 or the 20,000 number from?
The 6,000 from the genealogy.
Yeah, so we can look through all the way throughout the Bible and read all the genealogy linking all the way back to Adam. Okay, so there are people that believe in a literal 6,000 year period because that's as long as history provides us. And if we hold to a 7-day creation, which is the next part, Okay, they hold to a literal 7-day creation. Oops. What day was Adam born on? Yeah, on 6, right? So Adam was born on day 6. Okay, and if you hold to a literal 7-day creation, okay, and then you do the genealogy from Adam, then 6,000 is probably the least amount that it could possibly be. Does anybody know where the 20,000 comes from?
Carbon dating maybe?
No? Good guess? No? The what theory, sorry?
So many thousand years is represented in the day of creation.
We're going to talk about that. Yeah, so it comes from a different couple places. So it could be that which we're going to talk about out of Psalm 90. Okay, or it could come from, there are some people who believe that there's gaps in genealogy. There's people that believe that, if they don't hold to the literal 7-day creation, then they might believe that how long it took. There's some that believe that, we're going to talk about this in just a little bit, called gap theory, where they believe there's a chunk of time that happened between Genesis 1:1 and Genesis 1:2. Okay, so we're going to talk about all those different things, but generally, people who are young or new earth believers or people that really hold to that ideology, they believe that it's generally right around 6,000 years. Okay? So the part that we're going to talk about here in just a second is that they believe that fossils that normally take, from what we understand anyway, of science, millions of years they believe that through intense water, because of the flood, that exponentially created fossils. Okay, so they believe that because of the flood and what happened, that fossilized the bones and everything that we find now, and it fossilized them a lot quicker than what would be a normal process. Okay, so again, we're just hitting like the basic levels. If you go research all these different things, there's a ton more, like a ton more. Okay, but this is just basically a basic overview of these things. Okay, so young Earth. What are some problems that we might see in that thought process? What do you guys think? What do you guys think?
So, well, again, if you're going back to science, it's non-reproducible. You can't come back and say, hey, it's a repeatable process.
Right, so the same, there's really no way for us to know, right? The fossil thing is kind of what trips me up a little bit more, just because I don't know if that's, again, I don't have a great enough understanding of science to even know if that's possible, but it sounds odd to me that just a lot of water could change the fossil dynamics. I'm not really exactly sure. That part of it I struggle with. Yeah, go ahead.
I totally disagree.
Okay, go ahead. No, please do.
So even the idea that fossils would normally take millions of years,
Mm-hmm.
that's not even provable.
Right.
So anybody that wants to say that a fossil takes millions of years to form, nobody's been around millions of years.
Completely agree.
So to me, that's totally a biblical method, because that's
Sure.
taking the Bible literally.
Mhm.
And how do we know that it's anything else? Like if God wanted us to believe it was millions of years, then wouldn't he have said it was millions of years?
Sure.
Whereas this is very clear that he says this is how he did it.
Sure.
And the fact that the pressure that's created with the flood and then the sediments that are created, that is clearly defined in everything we see around the world. So the premise that millions of years, that part is what doesn't, I don't think that people that hold to the young earth, because I've studied that
Sure.
extensively,
Yeah.
believe that any fossils take millions of years.
Sure.
And there's no evidence for it because nobody's been around millions of years.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
Like scientifically though, in the sense of if you study some of the Mount St. Helens
Mhm.
effects, or you study that explosion
Mhm.
and the fossils that created or things that happened with that explosion is interesting, because people have studied that and say, oh, it took millions of years, but it didn't, because it was proven.
Totally. Right.
With St. Helens.
And I've even seen like when they try to disprove carbon dating and being able to plant trees and all those different things and then run against it for sure. And like I said, I think even to your point is like, because even actually both of you guys' points kind of build together, is there's no way for us to know definitively based on what we at least understand from the scientific method of being able to confirm, because it's not repeatable, right? So I think that there's some room there, right? Which is where I think, we can't definitively say, I think this is exactly what happened. I think it's going, hey, here's some options. And this sounds like it could be a really good option that I think people can back up through Scripture or other evidences for sure. And I think what we're talking about with the old earth, that there's people that can use the same things, right? And I think that as long as the discussion revolves around, hey, let's just learn and try to like talk through, which is, I love what about we do in this class, is I'm not up here saying this is one way or the other. I'm just saying this is what, and I appreciate you guys' insight. Cool? All right. So is there anything actually you guys want to add to those are kind of the three basic ones, but is there anything you guys want to add to the young earth? I'm not above putting anything else on there. Yeah.
So you're saying the 20,000 years period is still considered part of the young earth?
Yes, that would still be considered. If someone held to that the earth is 20,000 years old or less, it would be still considered young earth. Yep. Yeah, go ahead.
I guess the one thing that I would add to that
Sure.
would be the basis for the literal 7-day. Studying the Hebrew, when you look at Genesis 1,
Yep.
and whenever it talks about day 1, the way that it's worded,
Yeah.
that you talk about exegesis, you go to the first time a word is used in
Right.
Scripture, and then it will explain it. So he says it was day 1, and there's 24 hours.
Yep.
So the only time in Scripture that's ever used, it means a 1 day.
Yeah. And actually, we're going to talk about that as evidence of why old earth isn't. Why, again, I was talking about why some people believe in old earth and then counter to that. That's actually coming up later. But yes, so it's the same word that's used when it's used later as a 24-day period. Yeah, so we're going to talk about that with old earth. Yep, that's good. Okay, so that's young or new earth. Okay, the next one is, the young or new earth. Now we got the old earth. Okay, so these are people that believe that the universe is far older than 6,000 to 20,000, and similar to the young earth folk, is that within even that realm of thinking, they don't have a definitive amount, right? There's people that believe in old earth that believe it's millions of years old. There's people that think that it's hundreds of millions of years old, right? They don't even have a definitive number. So that's why I just said far greater than 6,000. All we know is that when people believe in the old earth, they're talking probably in the realm of millions, not thousands, okay? Okay? They believe that the way that we understand fossils and other archaeological findings back up old earth, right? So again, this is, and to Lisa's point, this is basically them marrying up what is commonly held to in the scientific community, because even in the majority, if you go to any high school science class in the public school system, right, they're going to talk about the Earth being millions and millions of years old. They're going to sit there. They're going to talk about fossils. They're going to talk about other archaeological findings. They're going to talk about ring layers and all these different things. And so a lot of times, this is what happens. And this is a perfect point that Lisa began bringing up, which is a lot of times what we do is we read the scriptures and then we hear what the world says. And then there's this attempt to try to marry the two, because conflict, a lot of people don't like conflict, right? So they try to go, well, how can this possibly make sense? So if people come out and they say, we believe that from science, they believe that the earth is millions of years old. We know from how we read the Bible that because of genealogy and the other things that we found, well, that's not true. Well, how do we make both realms happy, right? Which is generally how sometimes we get into sketchy water with theology. However, people have been able to look through Scripture and find some things that they use to back up their thought process, okay? So the two main theories that they use from Scripture. So two main theories that back up old earth. Okay, the first one is called gap theory, and that was what we already started to talk about. Okay, is that there's thoughts out there that between Genesis 1:1 and 1:2, that there was a large gap of time. Okay? Why might that, again, let's just, even if you might not agree, that's okay. What might make you think that that's a possibility from the scripture? Like, why would that be a thing?
Because there's no sun, no moon.
Right, so there's no definitive way of taking time at that point, right? Because what day did we get the sun and the moon? We're actually going to talk about it in just a second. Day 4, right? Day 4. Okay, so if we don't have the sun and the moon, how do we, again, we talked about this last week, God being outside of time. How do we gain a traction of time anytime before day 4 if the sun and the moon and the stars aren't there? Right? It's a good question. I don't know. Right? Again, we kind of trust what's happening. But the gap theory basically suggests that there's this innumerable amount of time between 1:1 and 1:2. So people that hold to this understanding or this viewpoint would say that there's a gap and nobody knows how long that is. Right? So some people, to explain certain things, would say, hey, that could be millions of years old. Could be. Right? Or it could not be. Again, it just depends on how you read and how you interpret it. Okay? The second one is called the day-age theory. Anyone know where we get that from? Or what that is, I guess I should say?
It is like 1,000 years.
Right, so they do not believe that, they don't believe that the 7 days were 24-hour periods. Okay? And they believe that from where? I think I already said it actually. Where did I say it was from? Yeah, it's from Psalm 90. Verse 4, and that's where David just says, but with you, a day is like 1,000 years. Now, what's the problem with that? If we even go back to our logic that we talked about last week. Okay, 1, it's out of context. Okay, and 2, what do you think David's really trying to get at, even if from our context of our conversation last week?
God is timeless.
Yeah, God is outside of time, right? So saying that 1,000 years is like a day, like that doesn't, like he's basically saying like, God, you're held to this linear timeline, and God's like, nah. So what is David really trying to get at in that verse probably? Yeah, he's just trying to get to the point, like, again, this is like Ezekiel. Anytime you read Ezekiel and he's talking about things that are going to happen in the future, and his brain literally, like, or John and Revelation both, like they see things that their mind can't comprehend. Like imagine seeing an airplane but living in biblical times, right? You wouldn't be able to explain it. So what do you say? It looks like a chariot in the sky, right? I don't know. Okay, again, they're using words that they know to try to define something, okay, even though they don't know what it is. So to me, I think David had a revelation in that period of time that said, God, like, I think you're timeless. How do I say that in my terms? Well, man, like a day is like 1,000 years to you. Okay? At least in my opinion. Again, people can read that literally, and people do, and that makes it a little bit challenging. Now, the part that I struggle with, so again, if each day equals 1,000 years, okay, this is where I was going to bring up, I was going to have you guys, obviously, I'm trying really hard not to like show my cards, but it's not happening, so that's okay. Is the problem that we already brought up is that if a day is 1,000 years, okay, and plants were created when? Day 3. Okay? What did we just talk about being created on day 4? Sun. So what you're telling me is that if a day is 1,000 years, you're telling me that plants existed for 1,000 years without the sun?
Well,
probably not.
I'll show my cards.
Go for it.
I don't agree with that
Right.
theory at all, but I do agree from the fact that God doesn't need the sun to
Right.
sustain life.
Right. So he doesn't need it, but he created it for it to work that way. Is that fair?
But I've also heard it said, and I think this is kind of cool, he created 3 vaults, and then he fills them. And so if you see the 6 days of creation, you've got, the universe, then you've got the sky, and then you've got the land and sea. And he goes back and he fills them. Here's the sun and the stars, and here's the birds and fish, and then here's the animals and man.
Could be. Yeah, could be. Go for it.
Well, I think we look at the sun as the plants need the sun, but they don't need the sun, they need light. The light is there. So, and then if you look at in Revelation, there's no sun in heaven, but there's plants. I mean, there's the tree of life that's making fruit.
Sure.
And so, you know what I mean? You don't need sun, you need light.
Could be, yeah. And that's the thing is like that, and to us it's like even talking about the vaults, like I've heard that theory as well, and that's the cool part about all this is like for me, I love just having these conversations because it's kind of like there's so many different possibilities out there and just kind of like breaking them down. For me, I think, at least in my understanding, and I could be for sure wrong, right? I'm definitely putting this out there as like my opinion, is like for me, God created the system to work within the system. And so for me anyway, when I read through the scriptures, it's going, like to your point, does science prove anything? No, but it definitely defines how God created it. So I know that our understanding of photosynthesis and how all that works is that, like, yeah, it needs light, but that light comes from the sun and it does more than just the light itself. And then so for me, like, that's what I'm saying is like my understanding of science anyway, like backs up what I believe, not contrary. And so for me, even when I look at that, I go, in my brain, that doesn't make sense, but there's probably ways that we could probably explain it where maybe it does. And I'm sure people that do hold to the old earth ideology definitely can, right? And they can probably rectify that somehow. So for me, that's a basic overview kind of both of those things. So I have a problem with both, if I'm being totally honest. I think there's issues with both that I struggle with, just because for me anyway, I see God operating in a different way that we're going to talk about in just a second. That again, this is probably one of the only parts of today that I'm just going to kind of show all of my cards where like this is just my opinion. So this is where I'm crossing down, and I'm going to speak it right here, is I'm crossing down to, okay, from both of these theories, I think there's some valid points in both. And how do I think that they actually work together? Because I think a lot of things in theology, we're going to talk about this with Calvinism and Arminianism too, is that a lot of times we like to think in extremes, and that generally God is somewhere in the middle. Okay, so in that same mentality, my alternate theory that I definitely did not come up with, I thought I did for a period of time, and then I did some more research, and I was like, yeah, no, I'm not actually that smart. Someone else came up with that. Okay?
Can I make a quick comment?
Yeah, go for it, Kerwood. Yeah.
I think what you said is actually really important and really helpful because these may not be the most helpful categories because there's more options. Like you said, there's valid points in both, and there's points that aren't valid in both. And the young earth and the old earth conversation may not always be helpful categories because we attribute age of birth to, therefore you believe all these other things.
Right.
Like just because someone believes that the universe is millions of years old doesn't mean that they believe in gap theory or day-age theory.
Sure.
Just because someone believes in a literal 7-day creation doesn't necessarily mean that they believe,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and that's a good point, is that these theories that I'm talking about, they might not hold to them, but it's just arguments that I've heard to use to explain someone that does believe in old earth theology. So that's a great point. And here's the deal, is, again, what are we talking about here? If you're a young earth creationist or an old earth creationist, is either one of those things going to affect your salvation? No. So why are we talking about it this morning? Well, because it comes up, and it's fun to talk about, and it's a good thing to have at least a base knowledge of what someone else might believe, so that way you can have a conversation. Is that fair? So apologetics isn't always like defending the faith and fighting some, right? And I would say it's never that, but there are people that talk about apologetics in that nature, which for me, I go, apologetics is basically being able to defend what you believe and being able to think through why you believe what you believe. Is that fair? So to your point, yeah, these are just two categories, but does that mean that people are going to fall into each part and believe each thing that back? No, you're right. Good point. Yeah, Lisa.
So the I guess an issue that I have with it all is
Yeah.
that when you start moving away from, like with the word literal,
Totally.
we have to know what each particular book, the genre it was.
Yep.
Okay, so you're talking poetry,
Yep.
you're talking history,
Totally.
prophecy, all these things. So I've heard there's theologians out there that are even teaching at universities that are saying things like, well, we can't take the Bible literally, so Jesus didn't actually rise from the dead.
Right.
And Adam and Eve were an allegory.
Right.
So once you set, I see it as So if we take the word of God literally,
Yep.
Jonah was actually in a whale.
Yep.
There was actually a universal flood that changed the whole earth.
Totally.
Jesus actually died. He actually rose from the dead.
Mhm.
That's where to me, like, we're not going to lose our salvation over it, but people are starting to tear apart the Bible
Completely.
based on the fact that they're like, well, that wasn't really literal.
Right. And
So
that's
where do you come in and go, well, this was literal, but that wasn't literal.
right. So that's what we were talking about. Where was I teaching that at? I think it was here, right? We were talking about, how do we address things in context, right? That's where a lot of that comes up is, remember when we were talking about how do we define if it's prescriptive or descriptive, right? Huge challenge. Same problem, right? Because, again, can we take all of the Bible literally? I don't think we can, right? There's parts where Jesus is like, if you sin, cut your eye out. Right? That's hyperbole, right? He's talking about the seriousness of sin. He's not talking about literally doing that. So then, to your point, well, where does that break down? Where does that... And I think this is why this is important, and I intentionally put this here, is that you're absolutely right in that if you start saying, I'm not going to take the Bible literally, there's a lot of problems that come from that. And I would say that the majority of the Bible you need to take literally, right? However, what I brought up here was that even if you believe in old earth theology, you have verses and other things to back it up, right? There's things that I really, really disagree with, but that people can use the Bible to back up, and I go, well, I guess I kind of have to be okay with that, just because simply they're able to use the Bible to back up what their mentality is. So even here, we can say, well, David didn't mean a literal 1,000 years, because that's my opinion. But someone could hold to that and say, well, I'm just taking the Bible literally like you are with the 7-day creation. And you kind of go, well, I can't stop you from taking that part literally. And you know what I'm saying? So I'm completely with you that, and I've heard that too, right? And luckily, I went to a conservative Bible college, right? So it's a little different. But I have friends that have been in classes that say that the whole Bible is allegory, all of Revelation, none of that's going to actually happen. It's all just like God trying to demonstrate what evil can do to the world, right? Like tons of problematic things for sure. But I think the thing that we have to leave the door open to, and this is where it's challenging for me because I'm really opinionated if you can't tell. And I really firmly hold to the things that I firmly hold to. But the thing is even if we firmly hold to, we have to have room at least for conversation of going, there are data points that they could use to back up their mentality that I can't really disprove because, again, either we don't have the science to back it up or there's other passages in Scripture that kind of seem like it. We're going to talk about that with Calvinism and Arminianism. Same problem.
But because science is always changing, we can't look at that as the authority.
Right.
Because, people thought the earth was flat. And, everything.
Totally. Absolutely. The more we understand, hopefully the more it reveals about the Lord. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
I think, too, like when you're talking with the non-believers, some non-believers are dead set on that they can't believe in the Bible because there is no old earth theory amongst believers.
Right. Yeah, and that's the thing is us disagreeing actually kind of hurts us a little bit in the eyes of a non-believer for sure. But this is why this conversation matters, right? Again, like bringing back, why are we even talking about this? Well, because at least us having an understanding, every time I've talked to a non-believer about an issue like this, I'm like, hey, here's kind of the general thinking, and there's a bunch of different options that people kind of follow, and this is kind of what they're using to back it up. And actually what I found is those people really appreciate just that I'm not going to say this is one way for sure because there's other theories out there that you could probably figure out to make sense that are within the realm of possibility at least, right? And I think being able to at least have that conversation fully and be able to give all of the options and all of things that are out there that could be brought up help. Okay, so where this thing breaks down for me. So again, I'm actually giving you my opinion because I'm actually in the camp where in my own brain, I have to take the 7 days literally. I have to. Just because I think, again, going back to the original language and even how God talks about it, I have to stay in the camp where if God meant thousands of years, I feel like he would have said that, right? I think him making it in a day is actually part of the wonder of creation, okay? And him making it in 7 days total. So for me, personally, I hold to a 7-day literal creation. However, to me, that still presents some problems because if we do see how things are found, and for me, this is where I leave the door open with fossils, is this helps me to at least somewhat rectify that, especially when we're talking about dinosaurs, which is why we're talking about that in just a second, is when we find dinosaur bones or animals that haven't existed for who knows how long, then we go, well, there might be some problems in the fossils. Because I look at Mount St. Helens, and I remember reading something similar to that. It might not be the same report, but similar, where they can recreate fossils in different scenarios, for sure. And high pressures of water, for sure. Ash, lava, like there's a bunch of different ways that fossils are created a lot faster than what we know. But the problem for me has always lied with dinosaurs, right? Which is finding fossils that are of species that don't exist and haven't existed in a long period of time. We can't say for how long, right? But for a long period of time. So then I go, okay, how does this work then? Okay? So the way that I look at it is actually through still the creation account, which is Adam. Okay? How did God create Adam? He created him as a man. It's interesting, right? Okay? So for me, I look at it and I go, well, God, what did he do? How do we know he's a man? Because again, some people actually believe that Adam was born a baby. Okay? Which is weird to me. I haven't heard many of it, but there's definitely some people out there in the outliers that think that he was created a baby, but there's some problems with that. Okay? There's a lot of problems with that.
I've never, ever heard that.
Yeah, it's out there. It's pretty wonky. Okay? So what's one of them? Well, he spoke with God in the garden. Okay? He walked with God. Okay? And what was his job? His job was to tend the garden. Right? He was given a wife. Okay? But they would actually, so I might have just ran across this weird, I don't even know. I probably research too far sometimes, because then I read some weird stuff. So they would actually say that Adam was created as a baby and then grew up as a man and wasn't given Eve until he was a man. Yeah, I don't know. It gets weird. Okay? Again, that is definitely not true, but it's weird. Okay? It's there. Okay? So his job was to tend the garden, to name animals, right? He's doing an occupation, things that babies can't do. Okay? So I just want to lay it all out there. Okay? But here's what's crazy is we don't think about often enough that God created Adam as a man. Because everything else, to Lisa's point, we don't really know, when you're talking about the vaults and all the different things, we don't know how he created plants. Did he just create them and they're just there? Did he plant them with seeds and then they grew? Did they, we don't really have any way to know that, right? Of how those things happened. The one thing that we can look to is Adam. So my question to you, and the thing that kind of has developed me in my theology, if God created Adam as an aged man, is it possible that he could create the earth as an aged earth? What do you think? I think so. So again, you guys can feel free to push back. Just because I told you this is my opinion doesn't mean that we can't have conversation. I'm okay with that. But for me, if I go, well, God created it to be an aged earth, all of a sudden the universe and how they talk about galaxies and how they were created and how long they were, right? Or even fossils that they claim to be X amount of years old. All of a sudden I kind of go, okay, if those datings are true, because I have to leave the door open to, could they be dated improperly? For sure, right? Carbon dating has been disproven a bunch of different times in a bunch of different ways. However, there also is merit to, we use carbon dating to date how the Bible's dated and helps us back up to know that we believe that it's true, right? So there has to be some give and take somewhere where we do acknowledge some of it, but maybe not all of it. That's fair. But I go, believing in an aged earth helps us to at least open up the possibility that they both could be true, right? Where it's a literal 7-day creation, but in that creation, God created it to already be aged. And then the conversation stops being, well, this disproves God, and people trying to disprove it to, man, that kind of creates some wonder in me. Is that fair? Where you go, man, how did God do that? I don't know. And I'm okay with that. But it kind of opens up some doors for me anyway, where there's a lot of evidence out there and conversation and theories, right? I'm using these words very intentionally, okay, about the universe and the planets and how they're dated to millions of years old. Okay? This talks about archaeological findings. Findings with age, with extreme age. Okay? you can see the effects of the flood and other massive events. Okay? At least in my opinion, from what I've been able to find anyway, is that holding to this mentality doesn't contradict Scripture, at least that I've been able to find. And maybe I'm about to get pushed back on and I'm going to learn something today, which hopefully that's true. Okay? Doesn't contradict Scripture or 7-day creation. Okay? So for me, this mentality at least helps me to read the Bible literally. It helps me to read the creation account literally. It helps me to read all of these different things. It still helps me to rectify David saying in Psalm 94, right, that he's just saying God's outside of time, right? For me, it fits all the paradigms that I need it to fit in for it to make sense for me. Pushback. Thought process.
Why?
What do you mean?
Why would God create an aged earth? It sounded perfect, but he created it. Why would he do that?
So why would he create Adam as an aged person?
Well, because he wanted to, there was an intellect. I don't know, like there's a relationship that you have with your grown children that's very different than what you have with a baby.
Sure.
And,
But he could have, right? Again, see, even coming back to the plant conversation of like, well, he doesn't need the sun, he just needs light, right? Kind of in the same vein is kind of going, well, in the same vein, he could have just created a baby, and there's a special bond that you have with a baby that as they grow, obviously things change, and then you can develop the relationship that way.
but he created a mother and father type of thing, like the
Sure.
family system for other children to come in.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah, it's a...
I guess for me, I go to the...
Yeah.
So, in Revelation, it's creating a new heaven and a new earth.
Yep.
So,
Is that one age?
so that...
I actually think it might be.
So that's where I'm like, that language for me is like, well, so why would you make an age? You know what I mean? If he's making it something new,
Sure.
you know, I mean, I guess you're right. It's like, is he going to just still use the earth and...
Restore it, which is what Grant would
and
prescribe
it's
to.
the same thing with, Eden was this, it's a perfect world, so
Yep.
we can't understand that, so...
Sure.
Yeah, in our mentality, we think of something aged being something bad.
Right.
So that's probably where our brain goes to.
Sure.
And if it was created perfectly, then it
Yeah.
wouldn't be bad. But it also seems like, you can have a gift and it sit in your closet for 10 years, and if you never use it, then it's aged and it's still perfectly good. But
Yeah. That's a good... Hey, there you go. You're only backing my point up more. No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
Could we maybe exchange the word age to mature?
Sure.
So the plants, you think about it, if we're saying literal days,
Yep.
you've got plants that are going to sustain Adam's life and the animals' lives.
Yep.
You couldn't, I guess he could sustain them long enough for them to grow. But if you think about it, you plant a tree, how long does it take to bear fruit?
Right.
How long does a plant,
Yeah.
I work with preschoolers, you plant the seed and you put it in the ground.
Yep.
And kids are like walking there the next day going,
Where's the tree?
Where is it?
Right.
So,
Yeah.
But this was a definite need, not just impatience.
Right. Right.
So,
And I think for the whole ecosystem to work together, again, does God have to hold to the laws of what we know to be? No. But I think he created that realm to work within it, right? So for me anyway, and this is where I might push into where you might disagree, and that's okay, is that I believe that God created Adam aged, and I also believe that he created the earth aged, including plants, animals, things I don't think there was just a bunch of baby animals roaming the earth when he created animals. I think he created them fully functioning, fully matured to create the ecosystem the way that it needed to. And I think plants is similar, trees similar, where when he talks about the garden, he doesn't talk about that it's all dirt and that it all grew at one time. He talks about it being a full garden. So you go, he's able to eat from the fruit right away, which kind of implies what? He probably created the trees to be mature enough to bear fruit to be able to eat from. So for me anyway, it to me, like I said, can it be disproven? Probably, right? If I had people that are much smarter than me in here being able to break it apart, they probably could. But for me anyway, it helps me sleeping at night, knowing that I can believe that the Bible is literally true, okay? And that if God created it to be an aged earth, that helps answer a lot of those tough questions for me, personally. Is that fair?
No.
Am I allowed to have my own personal opinion? I'm just kidding.
Not only that, but if you start naming animals as little babies, I don't think you come up with bears and scary.
You're looking at a baby cub and you're like, that's a bear. Yeah, I don't think so. Okay? All right, are we good with all this? You good?
I don't think I've ever thought of it differently, though, because to me that doesn't seem different than young Earth.
Okay, let's go there really quick.
Because I agree with you 100%.
Sure.
That the Bible clearly says he created trees to bear fruit.
Yeah.
So they were aged.
Totally.
He created the
Yep.
animals. I mean, I've always thought of them to kind of complement Adam. Adam was a man. The animals were grown.
Completely.
And they were going to, but so I don't.
Okay, so who knows why this might, so again, they don't necessarily contradict.
Yeah.
So good point. So I personally would believe that the earth is in that 6,000 realm. Just because, again, genealogy would say, if we hold the literal 7-day translation,
Right.
I believe that it's right around that time period. Okay?
But it's
So
sure.
right, so why don't these work together necessarily all the way? Now there are some people that would say that this aged earth theory does fit underneath the young earth, but there's a couple differences that I struggle with. What might those be? What do you think?
Let's see the question again.
So why might these not, right? So why might these not work together? And then we got to move on. Oh, geez. We're going to go over today. I'm just letting you guys know. Sorry. I apologize. We won't go into church, I promise. This is a longer conversation than I anticipated, of course, because you guys are awesome and you guys want to talk. I love it.
It's good having a conversation.
It is so good to have conversation. Yeah. Okay. Oh, I'm going to hurt myself. Okay. So for me, anyway, the biggest thing for me, Lisa, is, I'll just say it point blank. There we go. I'll just lay it out there. I'm not going to try to be cute. So I believe that like the way that they date fossils is correct, right? So if I look at it and I understand to what people are pointing to, for them to say like this fossil is millions of years old, like obviously people that are young earth creationists would have a serious issue with that. But for me, if it's an aged earth and those things are already just there, then for me at least it helps me to rectify that those findings don't contradict my understanding of creation. That's kind of where it falls for me. But again, like our understanding of how we believe in fossils might change. Yeah.
Why would they just be there?
Right. Again, why would there be a lot of things that God would create already there? So again, like even in the canyons and things like that, like how things are dated and aged and things like that with different like ice ages and heat waves and all these different things that have come throughout the waves of time. Like I think God intentionally baked those things into earth again just to create like more wonder for us. Personally. Yeah. Yeah.
If things
Gosh, man, we're going to spend a whole class on this one thing. I love it.
If things just appear, how does that reveal God's nature through creation?
Yeah.
Yeah, because, okay, so if you look at a fossil, where does a fossil come from? From some dead animal or plant.
Right. Yep.
Right? So how does just putting it there, implying now that there's death before sin, right?
Yeah.
And we open up a whole big old Pandora's box of mess on that one.
I agree. Oh my gosh, why do I keep spelling this wrong?
It's almost like God's sense of, like when you talk about God's sense of wonder, it's like kind of God's time-lapse photography. You know, he could take a span of using his own laws of nature and the creation of things, and God, in his all-knowing wonder, just can do that in one day. You know.
I guess I could accept it if he said he made it appear that way.
That's exactly what it would. So anytime we say that the earth is created aged, that would be the appearance of that age. Is that fair?
But just to say
Yeah.
it's put in the ground indicating death before sin.
Sure.
I'm sitting there going,
Yeah.
time to leave.
Yeah.
I'm in
Right.
agreement with him. Because
Yeah.
there's no death before sin.
Totally with you guys.
And
Yep.
when you're talking about agreeing with the scientists who do
Sure.
all these theories and stuff that change all the time,
Yep.
there's a worldview there.
Sure.
And so I think that we can't ever discard the fact that when we come at something, really it's not the fact that there's different science.
Mhm.
It's all the same stuff. It's
Sure.
just what's the worldview.
Totally.
And many of them are like, we are atheists and we are going to disprove the Bible and we
Yeah.
are going to debunk it in every way, shape, we can.
Totally.
And then we find out your dating methods are totally bogus because, like, for instance, with Mount St. Helens when it blew,
Sure.
there were creationists who took it and sent it to these evolutionist dating centers who said, oh, it's millions of years old. But they knew it was not true.
Sure.
So that type of thing.
Totally. And what I'm getting at mainly in that is, again, we don't have a full understanding of how it works. But for me, again, if we're having this conversation somewhere else and someone heard that we believe that from the flood we somehow get fossils that have the appearance of these different things, like they're going to say that understanding is far-fetched, just the way that you think it's far-fetched the other way. And that's why I'm saying, like, for me at least, it's finding common ground in the middle of something that doesn't necessarily contradict what I feel is God's character and who he is and what he's trying to describe through his passage, through his scriptures. Again, I'm not saying that this is totally correct. I'm saying this is just what my opinion is based on my understanding, and could it be flawed? For sure. And I'm just giving you all the options and beliefs behind it. Is that fair? So I totally am. I'm with you. There's definitely not death before sin. Completely with you on that. However, the appearance of things being aged past where they were, to me at least, helps rectify those situations. But again, could I be wrong? For sure. Fair? Yeah, Edson, go ahead.
There's also the thing for me with the mature earth. So, I mean, yes, there was trees, there's fruit, but, the whole world wasn't a garden. So I
Right.
believe there was a specific spot. So, man was created outside of that. So he was in the wilderness. Eve was created in the garden. In my mind, I'm like, so the earth, there could be seeds in the rest of the earth, but in the garden, it was mature things. This is where God wants to start. So, I mean,
could be.
I don't know. It's hard to say because, like.
Yeah. No, totally. And I'm with you. It could be. And my thing is again, and this is, Lisa, to talk to you even about your point, is for me, I don't know so again, when I'm having conversations with people, younger Trevor really liked to just like throw down and find weaknesses in their arguments and then like just pound. What I've found, at least attempting to become more mature, is where can we find common ground in the conversation, and then can we build from there, right? So do I necessarily agree with all things that are fossils? To be totally truthful, right, just being honest, like I'm not a scientist, right? I don't have a science degree. I don't have a huge background in science. I really appreciate people that do, because then I can have further conversations like this. However, when you're looking at it, and that the thing that always gets me, and that's what we're going to go to next, is the species argument, right? Which is the fossils that we've been able to find are animals that we haven't had in at least the human dictation that we have available to us doesn't talk about those animals, right? So I kind of go, somewhere in there, we have to figure out like these things, right? And there's some people that believe, so again, to your point, and I get bothered by this, there's some Christians that believe that dinosaur bones were like placed in the earth by Satan to deceive people, right? Which I go, man, if that's where our ideology goes, like we're in trouble, right? Because then that means anything can be presented any certain way, and all of a sudden now we don't know if it's God, we don't know if it's Satan. And to be truthful, like Satan doesn't create, right? So I have a problem with that anyway. So all that to be said is, like, this is a great conversation. And I want you guys to know, like, I'm not intimidated by it, and I'm not scared of it. I'm not, like, this is great. I love this, right? We could probably do this for way too long. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do now, is I'm going to throw something on the board that you might hate. So here we go. I'm just kidding. So this is my understanding of how dinosaurs work. And again, why do I talk about this? Well, non-Christians ask this question a lot. Okay, so I basically got to this point where I said, okay, I have to figure out something. Because me just saying I don't know kind of doesn't have its merit after a while. Okay, so I'm going to walk through this whole theory really quick, and then afterwards we can discuss it. Is that okay? Is that cool? All right. Otherwise, I'm not going to get through it. Okay. So, dinosaurs. Okay, so we know. Who created the world? Oh my gosh, at least we're on that page, guys. We did it. Okay? God created the world. Okay? And we know that over the course of time, that human life looked different. Is that fair to say? How do I know? Well, humans used to have extended life. Okay, how do we rectify that? Well, we know that the oldest person was who? And how old did they live? 969. Okay? So again, people read that and they go, Okay, so again, we actually have to talk about how that's even possible before we even get to dinosaurs. Okay? So Methuselah, compared to our average lifespan, which who knows what that is other than Edson? Edson knows. Okay? What's the average lifespan of humans now in 2018? Who knows? 84. Okay? It's somewhere between 80 and 84. And you know why those are two different dates? Men and women. Okay? So, that's the average lifespan right now of men and women in our current paradigm. So, the question comes up, well, how on God's green earth does someone go from living 969 years to 80 to 84? Right? There's probably some issues in there. Okay? So how can there be such a big difference between how long humans lived then compared to now? Okay? There's a theory out there. Again, theory. I'm using these words very intentionally. Okay? This is not like sold on truth. Okay? This is just a theory. So Greg's smirking at me back there because I have to define everything back here. Okay? So the theory out there is called the water canopy. Okay? And the water canopy is an expanse that's mentioned in verse 6, also known as rakia, okay, which likely refers to a water canopy which surrounded the earth before it was released to fall on the earth at the flood. Okay? So how I picture it is we have the earth, a weird smiley face, okay? And that there was this water canopy that surrounded the earth. And this expanse is called a tent curtain, a veil, clear pavement like sapphire, and molten glass. Okay, so those are interpretations of those different passages that explain what this water canopy is. So, how is life longer on this period of time? Okay, so, again, let's go to the how. Okay, how does it make your life longer during this time? With the water canopy, human bodies operated at capacity they were originally designed for. Oops. I can hear whispering. I'm getting scared back there. Okay? Who knows how much, actually, again, other than Edson, does anybody know how much of our lung capacity that we currently use? Say that again?
47.
47. Any other guesses? What? Okay, how much lung capacity do we use currently? Anybody? Edson, do you know? Yeah, 70, right? Okay, so we currently use 70% of our lung capacity. Okay? Now, people that prescribe to the water canopy theory, saying that very intentionally, okay, would say that their bodies would in turn use, because of the water being in the atmosphere, would change oxygen levels and nitrogen and all of the things that are in the air. All those levels would change within the water canopy. And they would argue that within that water canopy, that it would increase body function, and even extend human life. Okay, so they would say that because they're able to use more of a percentage, just so you guys know, the argument that people say that you only use like 10% of your brain at a time, total myth, total lie. Okay, not a thing. We use the majority of our brains even doing simple tasks. Okay, so when people go here, they say things like that, okay, which immediately disproves you in any conversation, because anybody that knows anything knows that that's a myth. Okay, so we have to talk about what we do know, which is the issue of lung capacity. So they would argue that animals or humans would be able to use more lung capacity, which means they'd be able to breathe more pure. They would be able to run extended periods of time. All these different things that would come from that. Okay? So, the length of life possibility before the flood was how long? What's that? The possibility? would be 969 years old as the longest that we at least know of. Okay? We know that the average length of human life now is what? 80 to 84 years old. And even if we wanted to go to like the 120, like you can talk about that through Scripture, okay? Is that basically what do we see between these two? What's the difference here? Around. Okay, there's a 9 times difference. Okay? There's a 9 times difference. And if this is true for humans, what does it also have to be true for? Probably animals, right? Because again, they have lungs, right? So it probably operated different for them as well. So, how does this have anything to do with dinosaurs? We're getting there. Be patient. Be patient. Okay, we're getting there. Okay?
It would also extend plant life, too.
It also could extend plant life, for sure. Okay? So, how does this have anything to do with dinosaurs? Glad you asked. Thank you. Okay? Is that depending on the species of reptile, okay, length of life is different. Okay, but in the wild, like you see tortoises that live like 100 and some years, right? Which is crazy. Okay, but do you guys know what the average life expectancy of an animal is? Just in general in the wild? Again, these are all averages, right? So again, we can find tortoises and other reptiles that are like hundreds of years old, iguanas that can be hundreds of years old, right? And then there's some that live 7, right? So spectrum. But on average, you know what it is? 30 years. Okay, so the average life expectancy of animals just in the wild in general. Okay, not just reptiles, but average in general. And I say that because there's so many different species of reptiles, right? That like we can't say this the average. It's like, okay, 30 years is about the average. Because again, there are some reptiles that live over 100 years old currently. Okay? So, if the average life expectancy of an animal, let's just say is 30 years. Again, we're just dealing with averages here. Okay? And there was a 9 times difference in humans, what would that probably would be true with animals? True? Okay? So what would that bring us to? 270 years. Okay? So 270 years old would be the average lifespan for animals in the water canopy. Okay? So how does this have anything to do with dinosaurs? Okay? Well, this is the kicker. Most reptiles never stop growing. Okay? They never stop growing. Humans stop growing when? This is actually a misnomer. When do humans stop growing? On average.
Brain or body?
Just body in general.
Yeah.
It's going to be somewhere between 20 and 30 years old, right? Probably not on the 30 years, but there are people that still grow when they're that old, right? But that's generally, like we don't see anybody growing more than after 30. Fair? Okay? But most people, the misnomer is that people think that people stop growing when they're teenagers, which isn't true. Okay? A lot of times that there's actually males that don't stop growing until they're 24 sometimes, which is kind of crazy to me, but here we are. Okay? So, if reptiles never stop growing, this would allow them to grow to much larger sizes of our current understanding of reptiles, right? Because otherwise, if they're living 30 years now, on average, and their life gets multiplied by 9, right? They're going to grow, what? They're probably going to grow 9 times larger. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Okay, if they never stop growing,
But it all depends on what rate.
it depends on what species, right?
Right.
Yeah, absolutely, right? So again, this wouldn't be true for all, but for the majority of reptiles, they never stop growing. Okay, because the way that their bone structures and everything works is that they can continue to grow and there's nothing limiting that growth. Okay, so for me, after the flood, humans began to live for less and less time because the water came down with the flood and changed the capacity which the human body could operate at. And if that was true for humans, it was definitely true for animals. So thus, reptiles live less and less time, which would explain why they don't exist in our current paradigm, which is how I believe that dinosaurs once existed, okay, and that now don't. And that's how I sleep at night. Because if I couldn't have an answer to that, I'd probably never sleep, because I have insomnia when I have a question I can't answer.
And there's also when Noah grabbed all the animals.
Yeah.
He's not going to grab a big, huge, giant dinosaur and put it on the boat. He's probably going to grab a cute little baby and then throw it on there.
Probably.
And how long is it going to live out there after the flood?
Probably.
So I don't know. That's kind of what I was.
Yeah, and then the further argument would be that because dinosaurs were never able to fully mature to the sizes that they were growing to, is eventually they couldn't reproduce, right? And they couldn't continue to live because they weren't growing to the sizes that they were currently before. Okay? So again, healthy sleep at night. Pushback. That's the end. Yeah.
Then again, I think it's Job where it talks about the giant.
The Leviathan. So why would that be different? Great question.
That's Loch Ness Monster.
I can't go there. You guys already think I'm kooky enough from the conversation today. I can't go to the Loch Ness, okay? No, but seriously, why is the Leviathan, why would it be different? And actually, where was Job present in the historical timeline anyway?
Well, either at the very, very, very beginning.
Yeah, most theologians would say he was in Genesis, okay? So there's some room in there. Okay, however, even if, why would the Leviathan possibly be different than land animals? Because it's water, right? So their dynamic doesn't change at all. Living in the ocean, right? The dynamic, at least from my understanding anyway.
River, though, right?
What's that?
He was in the river.
The Leviathan says in the sea.
I thought he was was that?
Yeah, it says in the sea. So I don't know. I would guess that'd be the ocean. I could be wrong, but that's when it talks about the Leviathan being in the sea. I could be wrong.
It says something about crossing that's where.
Does it? I can't. Yeah, I can't remember off the top of my head. I probably should have looked it up. Yeah.
Is your question about the size of them, or I don't know what your question?
What question?
You were saying pushback on this because
Oh, I just don't know if there's any part of this that you would disagree with. I guess as a point of reference, which is totally cool if you do. For me, if you have pushback or additional thoughts, I would love to hear them because obviously I don't know. It's a good guess for me.
So the fossils that you were talking about with the age theory,
Yep.
Don't have anything to do with dinosaurs because you do believe dinosaurs existed in Monthier.
Right. I mean,
So
I would
you're
have to at
talking
that
about
point.
other fossils that God might have placed.
Just in general. I don't know. So again, that's probably bad verbiage of God placing those things, right? Obviously. It's more or less that I believe that God could have created the earth. And what I meant more of archaeological finding fossils, as in not necessarily animals, but the rings in the earth that we find, different plants that had existed before, those are actually considered fossils too in the same definition. So I didn't mean necessarily animals, but fair question. Yeah. Okay.
You do believe that when the dinosaurs and all the animals got covered with the earth, that the silt and soot pushed them down and created those dinosaur bones being underground.
Could be. Yeah.
That's not what you believe.
No, it could be. Yeah. No. I mean, so so to be truthful.
You screwed me up with that whole fossil God.
yeah, because it creates death.
Whoa! What did I just say? I was talking about the earth. Yeah.
So you believe that the flood covered up dinosaurs.
So I think that the flood killed all the animals that were on the earth for sure. I definitely prescribe to that.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, I do.
With the settling of sediments, it could have accelerated the fossil producing process.
I guess so. Yeah.
Could it be possible too that some animals were wicked, because God said He destroyed everything that was wicked in the flood?
Well, so animals, we know that they don't have consciousness or the ability to be evil. Yeah.
It just says that He destroyed everything that had the breath of life.
Right.
And we know that animals have breath. God didn't breathe into them. They got
Right.
breath.
Totally true. Yep.
So, one thing for me, so I don't know if I agree with the water canopy, but
Sure.
I do believe that the earth was different before the flood
Sure.
than it is now.
Yep.
So carbon dating, they make a lot of assumptions that the earth was the same.
The whole time.
So that's, for me,
Right.
carbon dating doesn't work because you can't assume that it's the same.
Right.
So,
That's just one on the list of
yeah, right. So, I mean,
Yeah.
there's other
Yeah.
things.
There's quite a few. Yeah.
And then, just scientifically, I think the oxygen does make a difference, but the human, so perfect human genome when God created it.
Mm-hmm.
So mutations were not able to happen as well. So they lived for a long
Sure.
time. And over time, now you have mutation after mutation that because of sin.
Yep.
And now we live to 80, 84. So I mean, to me, scientifically, that doesn't I don't have a problem.
Yeah. Doesn't seem like it disproves it. Yeah. Yeah.
However, we look at with the modern day recreation of that as the hyperbaric chamber to a large degree, right? So
That's a good point.
injuries can be healed, stroke,
Right.
all these things can be healed. So we know that there's something with the increased oxygen and
Right.
pressure that comes with
And
it,
like-
would be this atmosphere.
Right, and like I said, it's just a theory, right? It's just an option. To me, it makes the most sense out of all of them, but there could be obvious other options. So hopefully from today, okay, so obviously we didn't get to the third page. I did not. I love that it took as long as it did. That's really awesome. Grant's going to tease me because I totally thought I was going to get through 3 pages, and he was like, there's no way. So he was right, as per usual.
But it's
Okay.
richer because we get to talk.
Totally. So here's what my hope is, okay? My hope is that from today, it at least got your wheels turning. Again, I don't consider myself an expert in any of these different realms, okay? My point of today was to present different options of things that are possible, or at least beginning the conversation. Hopefully we were able to gain a deeper understanding. Hopefully we were able to think more critically about them and maybe introduce some new ideas that maybe we hadn't heard of before.